Hey, welcome everybody to the Backyard Professor Responds live show. Happy Father's Day to all you dads out there. I've had a terrific Father's Day with my kids and grandkids today. So it's been a wonderful day, and now I'm going to give you a Father's Day discussion tonight. I have discovered what most Mormon apologists think is the number one strongest archaeological proof of the Book of Mormon. I have a lot of material to share with you tonight, so let's get it on. First off, I will start with a few video clips from various apologists describing their idea of why this is the largest, best, most powerful Book of Mormon archaeology discovery ever made. Let's see what they have to say about it.
Okay. What is, in your opinion, Josh Gailey, as graduate of Penn State Anthropology's program, archaeologist, a dude that's had the prestigious education and training and also traveled the world in all of your different responsibilities and, viewed all these relics and all of these archaeological sites and everything through the lens of, both academia and an understanding of the background of the Book of Mormon, so on and so forth. When you do all of this mental calculus and you do all of this analysis and you look at the breadth of all of the evidences out here, in your mind, what is the number one archaeological evidence for the Book of Mormon?
Well, when it comes to archaeology, I think it boils down pretty simply. Nephi makes a prediction when Ishmael dies.
Yes.
And Ishmael dies and gets buried, and they say, in a place which was called Nahum.
Okay.
And so that prediction is, in a certain place, at a certain time, we arrived at a certain location, and it was already named. There were already people there. That's the implication of what he's describing.
Okay.
So it's this
All right. Show us what you got.
Died, Nephi wrote that he was buried in the place that was called Nahum. Not only did Nephi imply that this location already had a name, but he gave details about where it could be found. So, if you followed Nephi's journey into southwestern Arabia on a map, you'd find the best location for the evidence you're looking for. In the 18th century, scholars actually recorded the location called Nehem or Nahem on maps of the Arabian Peninsula. Now here's the thing. It appears that no one noticed these maps or drew any connection between them in the Book of Mormon until the 1970s. But it was still hard to know whether or not the Nehem from the maps was the same place as Nephi's Nahum until 1997, when a team of German archaeologists found an ancient altar in southwestern Arabia with the name of a local tribal region inscribed on its side. That name? Nehem.
And we will have a lot of occasion tonight to discuss these ideas.
The story begins with Lehi's family fleeing from Jerusalem, which is in the same location today as it was in Lehi's day. The family then traveled south until they reached the borders of the Red Sea, another enduring landmark. Starting with these two known locations, researchers have been able to compare the rest of Nephi's travel account with the geography of the Arabian Peninsula. The results have been both fascinating and faith-promoting.
Aha! The key to the issue. Faith promoting.
In Saudi Arabia. 2 years later, Brigham Young University archaeologist Ross Christensen, in a letter to the ensign, stated that he understood that Nahum can mean mourning as well as comfort or consolation, and that these words might have been connected to a burial ground. He noted that Nephi implied that Nahum was an established place name, not one that Lehi himself had chosen. As Kent Brown has said, Nephi described, this is the place that was called Nahum, so others had already called it Nahum. We now have direct archaeological evidence that this region is Nahum and that it is a burial region from the Germans who excavated this area. We have a direct archaeological bullseye for the Book of Mormon.
It's going to be fun refuting my old apologetic self. Let's keep seeing what happens with others.
Not only have researchers discovered the likely location of Nahom, but they've now discovered a burial stone near this very region that dates to Lehi's time that is inscribed the name Ishmael. To appreciate just how crazy and remarkable this find is, let's break down exactly what this artifact is, where it comes from, how it corresponds with the Book of Mormon's Nahom, and what implications it could have for how Ishmael was really buried.
So through time, more and more and more archaeological proof and evidence is being found. Let's keep going.
And in 2001, Warren Aston then wrote a follow-up article to Kent Brown's article, which was published again in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies. And Aston talked about, provided more information on the altar and the inscription, and talked about the place where it was found and its context and things like that. And he also noted that there were actually 2 more altars with the same identical inscription that had been found at that same site. So
this was a remarkably fascinating talk by Neil Rapoli of FAIR, and I will get to more of his materials in part 2. This is such a gigantic topic, I'm going to have to make it in 2 parts. Part 1 tonight. The unfortunate thing about that is so many people think that part 1 spills all the beans and part 2 isn't worth watching, and they will be wrong on this issue, but we've got some real good stuff to go through tonight as we discuss Philip Jenkins and Bill Hamblin's famous debate, the Nahom Follies. But before we do, let's see what else other apologists have to say.
I'm Jim Gee. I found the maps of Nahom, which is the only definitive archaeological evidence of the Book of Mormon.
The only definitive archaeological evidence. We'll keep that in mind.
The finding of Nahom strikes me as just a tremendously significant discovery.
The gazetteers of Joseph Smith's day listed no such place.
What it really is a kind of prediction by the Book of Mormon of something that we ought to find.
Now, the chances of finding that exact name from that exact time in that exact place by random chance are just astronomical.
And to find it in the right location at the right time is a really striking bullseye for the book. And there are those who say that the book has no archaeological substantiation. That's a spectacular substantiation right there, it seems to me. Something that would have been unexpected, that it's so unlikely that Joseph Smith could have woven into his story on his own.
The Book of Mormon has made a complex prediction, and modern archaeology actually confirms that prediction.
It's a direct bullseye, as precise as you could wish it to be.
A spectacular discovery, it seems to me, Dan Peterson says. Why, yes. To a major apologist of the old Farms group, it would seem to him to be spectacular. We shall investigate that very carefully tonight.
That Joseph didn't even know that the city of Jerusalem had walls around it. Well, if he didn't know that there was a wall around Jerusalem, he certainly didn't know that there was a city or a site out in Yemen called Nahom.
The idea that Joseph Smith, for example, was really well versed on pre-Islamic Arabian geography or customs in the desert seems to me so ludicrous as to simply be beyond belief.
One has to ask the question, how could Joseph Smith possibly have known Nahom?
Yes, don't you love Dan Peterson's straw man argument here? Well, it just seems to me that to say that Joseph Smith had all this vast knowledge of pre-Islamic Arabia and he knew all the desert customs. No one has ever said that. That's not the issue. Fascinating how the apologists misdirect, and that's going to be my main lesson tonight as we look into this extensively. Finally, one last apologist that we must wrap up these video clips with, and then we'll get on to the main body of information.
The various efforts of Lehi and Sariah's monumental journey from Jerusalem to Bountiful through the modern lands of Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman. These efforts have demonstrated quite clearly that the incidental details recorded by Nephi fit the ancient world of the ancient Near East accurately. A broad consensus on the route taken, in addition to totally plausible locations for almost all of the important places in Nephi's text, has resulted.
You have no idea how much fun it was for me to find those old videos of myself as an apologist. I apologize. It was hedonistic, but hot damn, this is going to be fun. Notice how fuzzy those were. That was my old camera back in the beginning of my apologetic days. Yay. Okay, so what we have to do, there are some in this audience who have read the main debate, the debate to end the debate between Phil Jenkins and Bill Hamblin. Others have not, and therefore I have never seen this debate analyzed, discussed, shared in extensive details on YouTube at all. So I'm going to be the first one to do that. If I'm not, I'll be happily corrected. It doesn't matter. I can't possibly include all the information in this debate. It was epic. It was huge. It went on and on and on. Thank God it did. So what we learned tonight and next week in part two will show this just as clearly with great force of power, just on different theme than tonight, is the difference, the fundamental difference between a scholar and an apologist and their approach to this subject. So I have gone through and picked the highlights that I felt were significant in this debate. Others may disagree with me. I get it. It's no big deal. But for the sake of time, I can't do a 20-hour video clip here and another 20-hour video clip next week. So I have whittled this down to what I believe are the core essentials to understand. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me. I made these into slides. They were too small, so I had to put them in my Microsoft Word document, and I will scroll through them and talk and share the ideas, and I have interspersed my ideas in there as well. So let me bring this up. I will open up my, whoops. Oh my, let's share first the screen. Okay, now I know you're not, okay, here we go. This is the one I wanted. That is the one I wanted. Here we go. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. Oh, and I want to go ahead and, there we go. That's the way I want this. I'm kind of looking at myself, and yet I am, okay, let me know in the comments. Can you guys see that? I think you can. I can certainly see it. Let's see if I can get this to work. Yeah. Can you see that moving? I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. Otherwise, it's really not going to help you. It's better this way at this point anyway. Looks good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Enough shenanigans. Let's get on with it. Philip Jenkins. Now, okay. First is context. Phil Jenkins got on there and he began describing why there is no valid archaeology for the Book of Mormon in the New World. And he threw out the gauntlet, okay? And he tried to describe the issues that Mormon scholars have to overcome in order to verify to the rest of the scholarly world that there really are bona fide archaeological remains and materials in the New World, right? That was his context. As he published more and more of this on his blog, someone got word to Bill Hamblin and they said, dude, someone's got to respond to this guy. This is my speculation. I don't know if they got a hold of Dan Peterson first or Bill Hamblin. Anyway, Bill Hamblin rose to the challenge to debate Phil Jenkins, and man, debate they did. So here's the issue. I can't get to where in the debate all of the junior tier apologists began showing up to help Bill out because he was getting his head handed to him on a platter by Jenkins. We will see that tonight. I'm going to go explicitly through some good details on this. So the responses by Steve Smoot, John Gee, Neil Rapoli, Dan Peterson, all of those guys who were taking Jenkins on. Jenkins reminds me of Robert Rittner against the Egyptologists. He is a one-man wrecking crew. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with it. There is a lot of information here. Oh, and I got to share my screen again. Hang on, I'll share my screen, and then we'll get going on this. Window, that one, yes. Okay, here we go. This is Philip Jenkins. So if I look at the Book of Mormon as a historical text, as opposed to a spiritual document, it is simply not factually correct in any particular. So in some controversial exchanges, I've been surprised to find out how many clearly educated and literate Mormons think that the work can be defended as a work of history and archaeology. It can't. The reason mainstream historians and scholars do not point out that fact more often is either that they are unaware of the book's claims or that they simply see no need to waste time on something so blatantly fictitious. This really is not debatable. Straightforward, to the point. Now, this is scholarship. This is how the scholars see the Book of Mormon. Just keep that clearly in mind. Here's Phil Jenkins. Let me begin with a basic principle of using evidence. I have no obligation to disprove the Book of Mormon, or indeed any religious text whatsoever, because logically nobody can prove it negative. I do not need to pick through the book and highlight every anachronism or error, sparking trench warfare with apologists who have built up elaborate defenses against every charge and change and cavil. Rather, it is up to anyone who believes in that book to justify its authenticity by producing positive arguments in its favor. He will have reason to reiterate this time and again in this debate with Bill Hamblin. After nearly 2 centuries, though, nobody has ever produced a single site, object, or document that in any way supports any single line in the Book of Mormon. To use a phrase I coined in a recent post, there is no candidate for a Monteverde site that overthrows existing paradigms and demands us to take the Book of Mormon seriously as historic truth. Need I add again, as history, as apart from religious truth. This is a very important point. I hadn't quite looked at this particular angle before, and it's good. In 1972, the esteemed Mesoamerican archaeologist Michael Coe gave his opinion that the bare facts of the matter are that nothing, absolutely nothing, has ever shown up in any New World excavation which would suggest to a dispassionate observer that the Book of Mormon, as claimed by Smith, is a historical document relating to the history of early migrants to our hemisphere. Well, now, Jenkins observes, we are 40 years from that statement, with vastly more evidence at our disposal, not least the translation of extensive Maya texts and inscriptions. The last 20 years indeed have been a golden age of New World archaeology. Nothing, though, has come to light to change Coe's assessment. Very revealing here. And look at how archaeology has validated claims that Phoenician peoples from the Levant colonized North Africa and the Western Mediterranean, and incidentally, at just the same time of the supposed Book of Mormon settlements. The Phoenician Carthaginian evidence is concrete, massive, and undeniable. To return to the New World, these thriving archaeological disciplines are also supported by very substantial scholarship in linguistics, and more recently, genetics. No scholar working in these fields has ever found any reason to treat seriously any claims whatever made in the Book of Mormon, leave alone claim to find any substantiation. That's pretty significant. And now here is the key. And we will have a chance to see this again. It is not the case that there are a few or a handful of such remains or clues that pose nagging questions for mainstream archaeologists. There are none whatever. It's not a case of there's no smoke without fire. There isn't even smoke. I offer a question, and I believe when he offered this question is when people started talking to the Mormon apologists saying, oh, hey, we got to get you over here. You got to handle this guy, man. He's destroying it. Can anyone cite any single credible fact, object, site, or inscription from the New World that supports any one story found in the Book of Mormon? One sherd of pottery, one tool of bronze or iron, one carved stone, one piece of genetic data. And by credible, I mean drawn from a reputable scholarly study, an academic book, or a refereed journal, not some cranky piece of pseudoscience. This is the challenge. Okay, so, well, we might compare the world described in the New Testament. Archaeology and history cannot substantiate the details of Christ's ministry or the supernatural claims surrounding him. No, of course not. But they provide indisputable evidence that a society of that general kind existed in Palestine and the Levant around that time, speaking those languages and following those cultural and religious practices. In order to falsify that story, you would have to discard how many tens of thousands of objects, archaeological digs, inscriptions, and historical texts. You can't dig a hole in Jerusalem without finding something to indicate that something like the world portrayed in the Bible existed there thousands of years ago. The contrast with the Mormon scenario is evident. Where did Smith and his first followers think the events in the Book of Mormon had taken place? Beyond doubt, they were locating the action around them, and not just in the Americas generally, but in the United States and just over its then borders. And they believed the mound builder remains offered material confirmation for the book's tales. In 1834, Smith was traveling across western Illinois when near Griggsville, he passed the mound burial of one he identified as Zelph, a white Lamanite of the Book of Mormon era. Griggsville, now this was interesting too, it's 100 miles north of Cahokia and 100 miles south of the later Nauvoo. So we approximately know where, and this is what's fascinating too. The following day he wrote, the whole of our journey in the midst of so large a company of social, honest, and sincere men, wandering over the plains of the Nephites, my emphasis, recounting occasionally the history of the Book of Mormon, roving over the mounds of that once beloved people of the Lord, picking up their skulls and their bones as a proof of its divine authenticity, and gazing upon a country, the fertility, the splendor, and the goodness so indescribable, all serves to pass away time unnoticed. So I've been discussing the historical credentials of the Book of Mormon in order to illustrate the differences between mainstream and fringe scholarship. So briefly, the history that the book supplies of the pre-Columbian Americas is wholly fictitious and should never be treated as literal historical truth. We are free to discuss its merits as spiritual or symbolic history. That'd be fine. A critic might well say, well, that's your opinion, but many apologists defend the historicity of the book and would challenge every individual criticism that I might make. Actually, though, there is a larger issue at stake which involves how scholars work. This became clarified to me. Now, remember, I came out of apologetics. I honestly thought we were doing things right. That's why I did it for so long. Jenkins opened my eyes on this, among other things, so. He says, I have no problem in believing the idea of early transoceanic contact with the Americas, including from the Norse world, from Polynesia and East Asia. However, in each case, there is solid evidence for these links. And they range from the unquestionable to the pretty convincing. And they use archaeological and genetic and linguistic material. So how do I know that such evidence is convincing while the Mormon apologias are not? It's easy. I look at the ways in which scholars present their case and the outlets in which they do so. And this is significant, as I will show later on, as Jenkins will show later on when Hamblin shows up. So see, this is all pre-Hamblin. So this sets the background stage for our understanding this. If you want to see how objective scholars present and treat such evidence, then look at a book like Polynesians in America, Pre-Columbian Contacts with the New World, a collection of essays edited by Terry L. Jones, Alice A. Story, Elizabeth A. Matasu Smith, and Jose Miguel Ramirez Aliaga. 2011, Altamira Press. 30 years ago, claims about Polynesian contacts with the Americas, those were viewed with scorn. Over time, though, scholars pointed to a number of really suggestive individual examples that seemed to support such connections. Here's the point. They documented these case studies carefully and critically, and they published the results in major referee journals, and soon patterns emerged. That is critical. So within the past decade, enough scholars were working in this area to form a critical mass, and that book represents a statement of the case. So if you check out the citations supporting the Polynesian contact idea, they're from outlets such as American Antiquity, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. That's a huge one. That's one of the mamas of them all. Or the Journal Science, or the Journal of Archaeological Science, and so on. Oh, and let me add, some major journals in the field have already published respectful reviews of Polynesians in America, not to mention citations in other journals. So anyone hoping to defend the Book of Mormon's historicity should treat this book, Polynesians in America, as required reading. So here's our hint, you guys. We all need to get this book and learn how real scholarship works, because this book is nowhere near as on the lower level capability and influence of John Sorensen's Mormon's Codex, the massive 800-page one of 40 different parallels that he published before he died, his last writing. This one shows the real stuff. It shows the sort of remains and evidence that one might hope to find if Mormon claims had an ounce of credibility, and how such findings can be marshaled to convince a suspicious academic world. This is critical. The authors also acknowledge, as they must, that the burden of proof is on them. They can't just assert, hey, Polynesians came to America, and then wait for others to disprove that suggestion. We will see this is one of the main apologetic downfalls in Mormon scholarship and intellectuality. Oh, by the way, there are outstanding archaeologists of Mormon faith, and some do indeed publish in such stellar outlets. Here's the critical point. I noticed this at FAIR. They do not do so, though, on the Book of Mormon schema. Even some of the major apologists have on occasion published in respectable journals and series on other non-related matters. The controversial and confrontational Hugh Nibley had some solid publications in good outlets on Middle Eastern religion and culture, but not, of course, on the Mormon myth. And I noticed that because I was such an ardent Nibley fan. I collected everything he wrote before Farms even began the collection of his writings. I noticed his excellent scholarly works in the Western Political Quarterly and in the Review de Qumran, etc., all about the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Roman Empire and all that. And they were absolutely magnificent articles, and I collected them all. But when it came to talking about Mormonism and Mormon subjects, he would publish in the Improvement era. or he would publish in the BYU studies. He stopped publishing the Mormon stuff in the scholarly journals. Very interesting. So, no academic at a mainstream scholarly conference would dare cite the Book of Mormon as an authentic source on pre-Columbian conditions. No such academic has ever presented an archaeological paper concluding, and thus we see that the finds at Site X must be taken to confirm the description of the conflicts described in the Book of Alma. So in contrast, plenty of scholars working on the Middle East use biblical texts like Acts or Kings to support historical claims, even if they do not accept those works as literally correct in every detail. They can't fail to do so because these are priceless historical sources on particular areas. Interesting contrast there. You'll note that I stress the mainstream, reputable publications. I regularly, and remember, this is a scholar. This is how the scholars see this, you guys. I regularly see attempts to support the historicity of the Book of Mormon by citing out-of-the-way articles from very dated and fringe publications, which we can easily dismiss. Self-published books also surface frequently. If those are the best sources that can be marshaled in the cause, things are dire indeed. And I mean, that's the main source of digesting Mormon intelligentsia and intellectuality is the self-published book and the Mormon-created Mormon journals. Very interesting. So, if anyone believes in the Book of Mormon as a historical source, I would ask, why do you think we find that total academic silence? Is it because those many academics are part of a conspiracy of silence? Ooh. Are they incompetent? Are they phobic about using evidence from religious scriptures? Are they afraid of Mormon religious claims? Are they deliberately suppressing evidence that might support the Mormon scheme of things? I do not mention any of those options as serious possibilities, but rather to show and illustrate how outrageous is any attempt to explain away that scholarly silence and how far you have to wander into conspiracy theories. If a New World archaeologist ever found anything as anomalous as that suggested in the Mormon story, say a confirmed Semitic inscription on American soil, he or she would be partying for days to celebrate a career-making find. That has, though, never happened, not even once. I've been focusing entirely on the historicity of the Book of Mormon in its New World context. Despite that explicit goal, I keep getting questions on the line of, what about Nahum? Which for many apologists seems to be the ultimate validation that, yes, indeed, there is something in the Smith mythos. Supposedly, this is a site where Lehi stopped in the general area of Arabia, the place which was called Nahum, and in modern times, a related name with an NHM stem has been found inscribed on some altars discovered in the region in modern Yemen. The book, therefore, seemingly reports something that Joseph Smith could not have known in 1830. Shazam! And Meridian magazine breathlessly reports finding the first verifiable Book of Mormon site. This is literally the only case where anyone still seriously pretends that they have some kind of archaeological support for the Book of Mormon, though they should be embarrassed to do so. Book of Mormon archaeology is no longer an oxymoron. Of course, there is no such link. Pure coincidence offers a more than adequate explanation for the supposed parallel, which, as I will show, is not even that close. When you actually look at the vaunted clincher evidence about Nahum and understand how tenuous the alleged connections are, your response should properly be, when you get there, there's no there. Just what exactly was found? Well, Smith refers to a place called Nahom. The altar inscriptions, on the other hand, refer to a people or a tribe. As a sober account in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies notes, one text commemorates Biathar, son of Sodom, son of Nahum, the Nimite. Based on extensive analogies, that last name should refer to a family title like Benjaminite, with no necessary suggestion that the ancestral family was linked to the burial site. Usually such tribes did not construe places bearing their names, but that's not an absolute. Well, to give the authors credit, they honestly cite the inscription word as Nimite without pretending it was really Nahom. Yet despite this precise quotation, this is important. This point is really important because this is what I've seen in my studying of this to present this. The story morphs and expands in popular retelling until it becomes something like the Book of Mormon describes a place in Arabia called Nahom. And now scientists have discovered inscriptions using the same name at that very place. Whoa! For Mormons, as for many other religious denominations, the internet has vastly accelerated that process of folktale evolution fueled by wishful thinking. Even assuming that this was a close parallel, which it is not, there is no mystery about its origins. This is an important point, too, that he brings up. Smith was hugely inventive of names, even if he was pretty transparent about their origins. I've often walked by the Lehigh River. Notice how he spells that, L-E-H-I-G-H, which likely gave its name to Lehi. Meanwhile, the region of Palestine, Israel, is awash with inscriptions giving the names of people, tribes, and places into their many thousands. So also were the neighboring trade regions in the general region of Arabia, which were incidentally rich and fertile and quite unlike the grim desert of the Book of Mormon accounts. By the law of averages, and this is so important, you guys, because it is fundamentally critical to make sure, oh, and I didn't put it back where I should have. Anyway, there's a book. I showed it to you last week. Doggone me. By hand on the unlikely coincidences. Anyway, by the law of averages, the two lists of names, Smith and historical reality, by the law of averages, they had to coincide at some point. See, Bill Hamblin and others want you to think that this is astronomically improbable. And it might be, but the astronomically improbable happens all the time anyway. It's a basic law of reality. So that doesn't give us anything. They think that means this is seriously significant. It does not mean that. It would actually be far more astonishing if none of Smith's invented names had a real-life counterpart in the general region of the Middle East. And Hugh Nibley was good at finding all kinds of names, right? Well, that correlation is all the more likely when you know how Semitic names work. Often peoples of the region use three consonants without vowels, so DWD was the written form that we call David, Dawid. A name inscribed as NHM could be Nahom, Nuhem, Nahum, Nihim, Nehum, Nihim, Nim, Nam, Nimma, Namma. I'm making up the exact forms, but you get the point. The odds of some very accidental correspondences are very high. To quote John Hamer, and this is a really important point, although some apologists have described the odds of this Nahom, Nim, Nehem correlation as astronomical, Bill Hamblin, it hardly even rises to the level of notable coincidence. The Book of Mormon derives its names from a book that has Semitic sources, the King James Bible. Many of the names in the Book of Mormon are just plucked directly from the Bible. Lehi, Judges 25:9, Laban, Genesis 24 through 30, Lemuel, Proverbs 31, 1 through 9. Other names use the Bible as their inspiration with alterations. Jerum for Joram, Omni for Omri, Nahor for Nahor, Nahum easily fits into the latter category. In fact, Nahum is actually a book of the Old Testament, for Pete's sake. Come on. Now, and the reason this strikes me is because one of the things that really turned me on to Hugh Nibley's materials was when he went to the onomasticon studies of names and finding the ancient equivalents of Lehi and Lemuel and Sariah and Gidgidona and all that jazz. He was looking in the old world and the ancient places, and actually there it is in the Bible. So many of them. So it's not really a surprise. So to make this fit, we have to make several assumptions. A linguistic assumption, and this is so interesting too, man. A linguistic assumption that Joseph's English word, Nahum, which he allegedly translated from an unknown reformed Egyptian language, is connected to the Nim tribe in Yemen. An assumption that there was a place in 600 BC named after the Nim tribe. On other critical points, and he might be dated on that because I do believe Neil Rapalai has found some materials that I will get to in part 2. So Jenkins may have been wrong here. One other critical point never seems to be addressed, and that's the omission is amazingly irresponsible. Apologists argue that it is remarkable that they have found a Nahum inscription in exactly the inconceivably vast area suggested by the Book of Mormon. What are the odds? Yes, indeed. What are the odds? Here he makes a very powerful point. I'm going to emphasize this because it blew my mind as an apologist. Yeah, what are the odds? No way could Joseph Smith have known that or just guessed it. That's the apologetic mindset. Instead, here is the scholarly view. What are the odds? Actually, that last question can and must be answered before any significance can be accorded to this find. When you look at all the possible permutations of Nahum as the name of a person, a place, a city, or a tribe, how common was that element in inscriptions and texts in the Middle East in the long span of ancient history? Aha! As we've seen, apologists are using rock-bottom evidentiary standards to claim significance. Hey, it's the name of a tribe rather than a place. So what? So were there 5 such Nahum inscriptions in the region in this period? 1,000? 10,000? And that question is answerable because we have so many databases of inscriptions and local texts which are open to scholars. So we would need figures that are precise and not impressionistic. That's the important key to the YouTube Mormon apologists. They want to leave you with the impression, this is a bullseye. They want to leave you with the impression, the odds of this are just so mind-boggling that Joseph Smith has to be a true prophet, etc. That's an impression. They don't give you any hard data. Notice that. This is critical because you might conceivably find, as Jenkins says, in fact, that between 1000 BC and 500 AD, Nahum inscriptions occur every 5 miles in the Arabian Peninsula, not to mention being scattered over Iraq and Syria. So that finding one in this particular place actually is random chance. Or else, the one that has attracted so much attention really is the only one in the whole region. I have no idea. He wrote this in 2015, remember. But until someone actually goes out and does some quantitative analysis on this, you can say precisely nothing about how probable or improbable a supposed correlation is. And this, the apologists have not done. Now, Neil Rapalai is really working through several of the ancient Sabaean, South Arabic inscriptions, so he might be starting to do some kind of a quantitative analysis, but he is doing the apologetic two-step of coming to the question with the answer already, and he is only looking for certain elements. And I'll get to that in part 2 next week. So his is a flawed study also. Interesting though it is, and it'll be fun to share it with you. To make an obvious point once more, Jenkins says the burden of proof on this and the chore of crunching the numbers belongs to the people making the claims. Nobody has an obligation to disprove anything. And this will also come out later after Bill shows up and begins throwing out his rabbit trails. And I'm not joking. I'll show them to you tonight. You have to see them to believe it. But the Nahum argument also has a second and separate component here, which must be treated independently. Here we go beyond mere coincidence to propose a more concrete argument for a direct Smith borrowing. Evidence for an actual place called something like Nahum in Yemen or southern Arabia. Well, this appears in European maps from the mid-18th century onwards, so that unlike the altar inscriptions, these were clearly known in Smith's lifetime. Now, a form of NHM, shows up, for instance, in the travel narrative and maps of Karsten Niebuhr of the 1761 Danish Arabia Exposition, marking a location in Yemen. An English translation of his writings appeared in 1792, and copies were available in U.S. libraries in the early 19th century. Now, there have been, let me read this real quick. So might Joseph Smith have looked at a map in a bookstore, been given one by a friend, seen one in a neighbor's house, discussed one with a traveler, or even bought one? After all, there is one thing we know for certain about Joseph Smith, which is that he had a lifelong fascination with the Oriental, with Hebrew, with Egypt, with hieroglyphics, with his reformed Egyptian. He would have sought out books and maps by any means possible. No, I'm sorry to suggest anything so far-fetched. It is far more likely, is it not, that he was visited by an angel and discovered gold plates filled with total bogus misinformation in everything they say about the Americas, but with one vaguely plausible site in Arabia. Occam's razor would demand that. And yes, I'm joking. But on my point, and I thought that was a little bit fun, but on my point, we don't even have to prove that Joseph Smith ever saw that map. We don't have to disprove or prove anything. We're not the ones making the extraordinary claim. The fact that there was a map available very near Joseph Smith is all we need to do and say coincidence. Literally. It's up to the Mormons to have to try to prove that he didn't see that. Very interesting idea. That's something Hamblin forgets a little later on in this debate, and it bites him in the butt big time. I'm getting to it tonight. The apologist stance on these matters involves some deep ironies, and I thought this was very insightful by Jenkins. They go to inordinate lengths to stress the improbability, or allegedly the impossibility, of Smith having access to any such maps or other materials. Just to make this clear then, issues of plausibility, probability, evidence, good sense, and conformity to logic and science are vitally important in analyzing any matters potentially harmful to the Book of Mormon. We need to be hyper-cautious, hypercritical, and eschew any speculation not grounded in precise documentation. If applied by scholars attacking that book, though, then such criteria are unacceptable because they ignore the faith on which it is based and which is higher than mere reason. See, this is the out the Mormons leave themselves. However, Such critical methods are probably a clear symptom of anti-Mormon bigotry. Got that? Very powerful point here. Wisely, the LDS Church makes no statements, either supporting or doubting the alleged Nahum connection. See, Joseph Smith, back in the day, we have Dan Vogel in the audience. He can verify this. Oh, heck, any of us can verify it by looking in the D&C. If it was something so trivial as what type of beasts are in the book of Revelation, all he had to do is go to pray to Jesus, and Jesus would open up the heavens and reveal the truth to him. And none of that pertained to his salvation, but the Lord Jesus revealed all kinds of stupid, trivial stuff to Joseph Smith when he was asking, hey, should I go to the store today and buy some bananas? The Lord had revealed, well, no, not today, because your enemies are hiding on the road and they're going to get you. So, and if you do have to go, you better go back east instead of over to the north. Just silly, stupid stuff like that. This church that claims it has the mantle of Joseph Smith prophetic revelation could easily discover the truth of Nahum, but it refuses to. Now, it's amazing, too, that the church also prophesies and says that if you will pray to the Holy Ghost, it will reveal the truth to you. But it has to conform with what they think. You can't make this stuff up, you guys. It's fascinating. Is there even the ghost of a case here that needs debating or answering? Obviously not. And this is the best the apologists can do? Well, I just showed you 9 video clips of 9 different apologists, many more than that says, yeah, that's it. At this point, here comes our hero, Bill Hamblin, to destroy that secular scholar who doesn't have the gift of the Holy Ghost to guide him in the truth like Bill Hamblin has. And I must emphasize this. I really must emphasize this. Bill Hamblin's main defense, and he falls back on it time and again, is that the scholar is too ignorant of the subject to have any right to criticize. Seriously, Hamblin takes it to that level. He doesn't even have the right to question this. And he refuses to read the Mormon scholars. So he's useless. And he needs to do his homework. I'll show you this. This is utterly astonishing. How Bill Hamblin comes on here and the point just whoosh goes right over his head. And he never does see why he can't convince the scholar, or any scholar for that matter. This is what is so fascinating about this whole exchange. So, here comes Bill Hamblin. The reality is that Jenkins is woefully uninformed regarding ancient Book of Mormon studies. Notice this. To Hamblin, the critical point is the scholars' discussions of the historicity of the Book of Mormon. Notice this regarding ancient Book of Mormon studies. If a scholar decides to publicly and dogmatically opine on a topic, it is not unreasonable to expect him to have an informed opinion and to actually understand the topic. You see where he's going? Now, he has no choice. All Mormon apologists do this for one very powerful reason. They actually can't fulfill Jenkins' criteria of finding an archaeological item to verify the reality of the Nephites and Lamanites. And we'll see this again and again tonight and next week. Unfortunately, anyone who knows anything about ancient Book of Mormon studies can immediately see that Jenkins doesn't know what he's talking about. And this is the other claim leveled against all scholarship by the Mormons. You just don't know enough. You haven't read our stuff, therefore you are disqualified. What a fascinating stance. Now, of course, that doesn't mean he's necessarily wrong. The Book of Mormon is either an ancient book or it isn't. So even by mere random guessing, one has a 50% chance of getting it right, but that's not the point. Of course it's not. The point is that Jenkins cannot demonstrate his case because he hasn't done his homework. And notice the clever rhetorical trick Hamblin pulls again and again and again in this debate. You made the claim, Jenkins. You show your case. Jenkins didn't make the claim. He's simply asking for one item of archaeological information showing the ground down-to-earth reality of anything in the Book of Mormon. He's asking the Mormons to back up their claim, and Hamblin's going to change the direction. He's going to try to change the direction and turn it to, you have to make your case why you don't accept our Mormon scholarship. No, we don't have to do that. But the Mormons have to take this tactic because they have nothing else to go with. Otherwise, they would show it. Who wouldn't be as excited as all get out to be able to tell these skeptical scholars and those stupid atheists, hey, we have a bona fide Nephite axe and a Lamanite bow and arrow that the Peabody Museum also accepts as authentic. It's been studied by us and the secular scholars, and they all agree, yes, this was a Book of Mormon weapon. It wasn't Mayan, it wasn't Incan, it wasn't Aztec, it wasn't ancient Peruvian, it wasn't the Hope Wells in the United States. This is genuine Lamanite stuff. If they had that, that is the number one first thing you do to these skeptics. No Mormon apologist does that. There's a story there. Let's keep watching. Oh, it gets really good now. Oh my gosh. This is why I came away saying Jenkins just mopped the floor with Hamblin, man. So anyway, here we go. This is my comment down at the bottom here at the bold. Hamblin is entirely starting off on the wrong foot. Asking for an archaeological item is wrong now, you see. So here we go. And Jenkins, on the other hand, he's delighted when Hamblin shows up, and he goes right to the only issue that actually matters. Hey, can anyone cite any single credible fact, object, site, or inscription from the New World that supports any one story found in the Book of Mormon? One sherd of pottery, one tool of bronze or iron, one carved stone, one piece of genetic data, and by credible I mean drawn from a reputable scholarly study, an academic book, or a refereed journal, not some cranky piece of pseudoscience. And Hamblin responds and he says, notice what impresses Hamblin. This is obfuscation to that question. Give me something, Jenkins says. He says, oh, Hamblin says, well, there's about a dozen professional LDS Mesoamericanists who accept the historicity of the Book of Mormon. Who cares? Where's the article? Where's the object? Furthermore, each of these scholars have far more knowledge of Mesoamerican studies than Jenkins. Again, who cares? That's not the issue. That is 100% irrelevant. Yeah, I put my note in here. And then then Hamblin says, I maintain that these LDS Mesoamericanists are authentic scholars, not cranks, as Jenkins implies. I say, okay, let's see what you have. The way Jenkins refutes this is really amazing. Number one, so this is Hamblin's list. Number one, they've all received PhD degrees from accredited non-Mormon universities in Mesoamerican scholars. Number two, most teach Mesoamerican studies at accredited universities, some at BYU, others at secular colleges. Number 3, they regularly attend and present papers at the professional meetings in the field. Notice they present papers, not archaeological artifacts, by the way. And number 4, some lead. They don't just participate in major archaeological digs in Mesoamerica. And 5, they publish peer-review articles in the standard academic journals. They edit books and journals and publish university press books in their fields. And I ask, okay, so where is their archaeological item? The apologists are impressed with degrees, with authentic scholarship, not the archaeology. That's important. Well, these are all objective criteria by which we can determine that LDS Mesoamericanists are accepted and well respected in the discipline. See, that's what bugs Hamblin. He wants to be respected. He wants to be accepted. Well, okay, then show us the archaeology for your book that you're claiming is history. That will instantly bring respect. Bill. This does not mean, of course, that their views on the historicity of the Book of Mormon are accepted. In fact, they are not. While the Book of Mormon may not be accepted as authentic history by non-Mormon Mesoamericanists, Book of Mormon believing scholars are routinely accepted as authentic scholars by non-Mormon Mesoamericanists. You see, again, we're real scholars, and so you really should read our materials. Well, you may be scholars, but where is the archaeology for your book to be history? That's what we want to know. Their views on the historicity of the Book of Mormon at least merit some degree of attention, if not respect. No, they do not. First, you have to show the reality of the Book of Mormon. Then the respect will follow. They cannot simply be dismissed out of hand as if they were authentic scholars one moment and driveling cranks the next. Oh, yes, they can, because when they publish about bona fide archaeological materials of Mesoamerica, the Mayan, the Inca, the Aztec, the Peruvians, etc., the Hopewells in North America, the Anasazi, the Navajo, the Pueblo, etc., then that is very respectable. But if they published on the Book of Mormon, they only publish in their own Mormon-made journals, so it's more or less inbred scholarship without even establishing whether the Book of Mormon is actual history. That's when they become crank scholars. And Bill Hamblin doesn't see it that way. But that's the reality from all of the worldwide scholarship. Interesting. And here's my note. All of this is essentially irrelevant. See, he's trying to get our eye off the prize question. Look, is this any different than with the Joseph Smith papyri? I mean, the best masters of obfuscation of all time is Hugh Nibley, John Gee, and Kerry Mulstein, and Michael Dennis Rhodes, and to a lesser degree, Dan Peterson and Steve Smoot and Neil Rapalai and all those guys, because they don't want you to know the only issue that really matters. Did Joseph Smith accurately translate the papyri into the Book of Abraham? Because the answer just destroys Joseph Smith. No, he did not. So they obfuscate and go off to all those other little extra rabbit trails of Egyptian influence, Mesopotamian, the Egyptian endowment in the temple, and on and on and on, the waiter, Shulam, and all that jazz, the hieroglyphics, but they never get to the main point. We see Hamblin doing this exact same philosophical sleight of hand with the Book of Mormon. And this is important to recognize for us, and we do recognize it, and I will point it out again and again and again as Hamblin does so. All we want is that one archaeological item, affirming just one story in the book. We're not asking for a whole lot. Jenkins acknowledges this. Hamblin says, but doesn't recognize its implications. If secular Mesoamericanists accept LDS Mesoamericanists as professional scholarly colleagues, what reason does Jenkins have to reject their arguments out of hand? Because there's no evidence for the authenticity of the Book of Mormon. That's the reason. We don't reject their studies of the Mesoamerican landscape of the Mayan, the Inca, the Aztecs, and all that jazz. That's not what we're rejecting. We're rejecting their claim that the Book of Mormon is also history. You have no evidence for that. That's why we do this. Just to answer the question. They may be wrong in their belief in the historicity of the Book of Mormon. They are. But they certainly understand the issues and evidence relating to both the Book of Mormon and Mesoamerican studies. There is no evidence for the Book of Mormon, Bill. There is none. That's what Jenkins is saying. You see how Bill is changing the nature of the argument here. But unfortunately for him and all the other apologists, they have no choice. So it seems clear that Jenkins is engaging in rhetorical posturing. Wow! Can you say irony here? Who's doing the rhetorical posturing, Bill? And he's doing this in order to marginalize LDS scholars. No, he's not. He's stating the cold, brutal reality. The scholars are respected and their studies are quoted and used when they're on legitimate historical topics of Mesoamerican history. But when they start talking about Book of Mormon history that has absolutely not even one item, then they're not cited. That's not to marginalize them. That's just the way it is. Until you can establish the reality of the Book of Mormon as history. That's the apologists' problem, not the rest of us. So, and thereby doing this, he relieves himself of any obligation to actually read what they have to say. Of course he does, because if they're not first presenting the archaeological item, nothing they say means anything to us. Exactly right. And respond to their actual arguments. We're not interested in arguments. We're interested in evidence. See, I think the apologists are confusing their words in their scholarly articles as evidence for the history of the Book of Mormon. I think that's where the problem comes in. If it's not published by secular journals, it can be safely ignored. You damn straight. You better get with it. This is the same argument that Klaus Baer gave Hugh Nibley on the Egyptian materials. And Nibley kept publishing all of his stuff through church materials. The Ensign, Deseret Book, BYU Studies, some Sunstone, etc. But he wouldn't publish it in Egyptian journals because they would have sawn him in two. They would have destroyed his arguments, man. So this is really critically important, that it's the same reason still until you can establish reality first, not second. This is critically important. So to get back to the argy-bargy here, Hamblin thinks it's about scholarly arguments. It's not. It's about an archaeological item of evidence confirming the Book of Mormon history. Now Hamblin says, in my view, there's only one thing that is important in this discussion. Here's where he misses it. What is the evidence, the interpretation, the arguments, and the analysis brought to bear on the question of the historicity of the Book of Mormon? Well, you literally have no actual evidence of Nephites and Lamanites that can only be established by archaeology. And incidentally, seriously, in all sincerity, this is very, very powerfully established for ancient Israel as well. And I show this book very often. William G. Deaver, Beyond the Texts, an archaeological portrait of ancient Israel and Judah. He demonstrates conclusively the importance of the archaeological data first to establish a reality. Only when that's done can arguments and analysis and scholarly discussion take place on the evidence. In other words, the Mormon speculation concerning the historicity of the Book of Mormon is just that. It's speculation. And we are under, literally, we're not trying to be difficult or obtuse. We are under no obligation to even engage it, let alone refute it, because until we get that base of reality of the Nephites and Lamanites, there's nothing to refute. The Mormons are working in guesswork, is what I'm trying to say. Let's keep going. This is so fascinating how Hamblin doesn't get it, or else he does, and he's being very dishonest. I'm going to graciously give him the credit of the doubt and say, no, I think he's just definitely ignorant and obtuse himself. He didn't grasp the significance. Ignorance is much better than deception anyway. So his idea, what is the evidence, the interpretation, arguments, and analysis? All of that's wrong-headed. And here I go. I know Jenkins has asked for a single piece of archaeological evidence, okay? And you are off to the races worrying about scholars being bona fide and knowing more about something than Jenkins knows. This rabbit trail is a distraction entirely. Ooh, hope that wasn't a Freudian slip, rabbit tail. It has nothing to do with the interpretation and argument and analysis. Archaeological evidence first, then let's analyze. That's the scholarly method. And this is the apologist's go-to strategy. Complain to get our eyes off the only things that matter. Well, you guys don't know enough. You haven't read all of our materials. That's completely irrelevant to the fact that you've got no materials that count, right? Okay, so let's keep going. Now Jenkins answers. You misstate my views. I've never suggested that LDS scholars in any field are inferior to their colleagues, whether in Mesoamerican studies or not. See, that's the other thing they'll do, is they will misstate what is being said in order to guide the discussion in a direction they want you to go so that they can control the discussion and never have to produce the evidence that shows the reality of the Nephites and Lamanites. They get you so flustered in other stuff. You'll see how Jenkins handles this with Hamblin. It is sensational. And he said, by the way, there are outstanding archaeologists of Mormon faith, and some do indeed publish in such stellar outlets. They do not publish, though, on the Book of Mormon schema, and that is exactly true. It's amazing, but Jenkins got it right. BYU notes, BYP, gadzooks, is that another Freudian slip? BYP notes, and of course, that is what apologists do not want to be known. The apologetics work on Book of Mormon evidences is far too inferior to merit inclusion in a scholarly, peer-reviewed, established scholarly journal. If it's not, then why are you not publishing your Book of Mormon evidences of chiasmus in Mesoamerican texts and the Book of Mormon, for instance, as one example? Why is that not being published in Mesoamerican archaeology peer-reviewed journals, if you really think that's a piece of evidence? It's only published in Mormon outlets. Jenkins says, my main issue is this. There are, as you say, terrific Mormon Mesoamericanists, world-class people. That's not the issue. Why don't they publish in mainstream outlets on Book of Mormon themes? The answer is simple. They would dearly love to, but they have nothing vaguely convincing or plausible or respectable that would support that text, and they can't make bricks without straw. Ooh, what a powerful biblical analogy. If they did have anything plausible to play with, their professional reputation and clout would mean that it would appear in a flagship journal almost instantly. You see, Hamblin is bragging. These guys are well known. They're well respected by other scholars in the field, etc. Well, then publish your stuff in the scholarly journals, and that would make it even more better, right? That is, given all their knowledge and their experience and their background, yet they don't publish in those journals. It sort of suggests that there is nothing there to find, doesn't it? So powerful. And Hamblin comes back. Oh boy. Professor Jenkins, along with many other critics of the historicity of the Book of Mormon, claimed that the absence of Book of Mormon related publications in the leading academic journals on Mesoamerican history and archaeology demonstrates that the Book of Mormon should not be taken seriously because the editors of those journals do not take it seriously. This argument is fallacious. Who cares? It's still the truth. It's what happens, and it's not fallacious. First of all, it is a form of the fallacy of the argument from authority. More importantly, however, the truth is that most Mesoamericanists are not qualified. Here we go again. They are not qualified to pass a scholarly judgment on the Book of Mormon. You see, only we Mormons are qualified. The rest of you guys, no. Nope, you're not qualified. Only we are. They do this all the time. BYP says, rabbit trail. We are looking for an item of archaeology to establish the reality of Nephites or Lamanites. Okay, back to Hamblin. I maintain that the vast majority of Mesoamericanists have never read the Book of Mormon. I've talked to several colleagues who say they know of 3 non-Mormon Mesoamericanists who have read the Book of Mormon. Furthermore, the vast majority that have read it have not read it with any degree of open-minded scholarly seriousness. Yeah, he knows this how, right? Finally, even those few who have read it seriously are generally unfamiliar with the scholarly literature in the field. Aha! See, there's the point. Don't ignore our scholarship, damn it. Oh. And until secular Mesoamericanists are willing to seriously study, not just superficially read the Book of Mormon, and respectfully engage LDS scholarship on the Book of Mormon, their opinions are uninformed. This is so classic apologetic nonsense. It is a prejudice rather than a critical judgment. I should say so, but it's on your end, Bill. I don't think it's too much to ask for them to not make dogmatic, uninformed assertions about the historicity of the Book of Mormon if they haven't even read the book or engaged LDS scholarship on the matter. Yeah? Well, in that case, where's the archaeological item? That's where the rubber meets the road, man. BYP says, rabbit trail. Engaging with LDS is irrelevant without an archaeological item demonstrating the Book of Mormon peoples actually existed first. If Hamblin had that item, you can be sure he would have been showing it. Fundamentally so. That would have been the first thing he showed. Oh, you want archaeology item? Yeah, here's the Nephite axe. Here's a Lamanite bow and arrow. Paradoxically, Hamblin says, the only journals in the field of ancient Book of Mormon studies which actually do authentic and rigorous peer review were published by Classic Farms. The Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, the Review of Books on the Book of Mormon. To them can now be added the Interpreter. Oh my God, he's stretching. I know this because I have occasionally served as editor. Boy, nothing like self-certitude, huh? And peer reviewer for those. And peer reviewer. So he's admitting right here, our peer review is that when Dan Peterson writes an article on the Book of Mormon, I review it. And if I like what it says and if it supports the Book of Mormon, then yeah, it passes, we'll publish it. That is not peer review. He let the cat out of the bag in the very next sentence. Is that not ironic? Yes, we have authentic and rigorous peer review, and I know that because I was one of the editor and peer reviewers for those very pro-Mormon publications. Wow. And Hamblin couldn't see that. They use precisely the same process used by any other academic journal, and that's just ridiculous. They do no such thing. Rhetorically speaking, the peer review argument used by critics of the Book of Mormon is in fact designed to stifle discussion rather than expand and enhance it. It is not. It is to control the Mormon bias. And within their own sources of scholarship that they themselves have invented, and then they themselves peer review each other only, they show that inbred scholarship and bias, and that is what kills your credibility. It is not the non-Mormon's bias to shut down the discussion. It is the non-Mormon attempt to get you to start showing the archaeological proofs for the reality of the Nephites and Lamanites. We will keep repeating that until the apologists grasp the significance of that approach, because that is the only real way to establish the historicity of an ancient text is first archaeology. And there's hundreds of books on that subject. Well, Jenkins keeps it real. I am puzzled by the directions that Dr. Hamblin's columns are taking, or rather not taking. Basically, why has he not yet addressed the critical issue of the authenticity of the Book of Mormon? Why has he not yet begun to address my rule of one question? See how Jenkins keeps it real? He keeps focused on the only issue that really matters, no matter how many rabbit trails Jenkins takes. Namely, to produce from the New World one single object or site, one piece of genetic or linguistic evidence that begins to support the historicity of that source, the Book of Mormon. He is as well acquainted with these debates and issues as well as anyone around. So why is he not yet socking me daily with convincing examples from Owashika or Ohio, Michoacan or Michigan? I mean, stop me before I alliterate more. Hamblin is literally showing him nothing from anywhere. He's just talking. See, by my reading, everything he has said in his several columns to date assumes the book's authenticity as an ancient text. And it is on that basis that he suggests how sad and inappropriate it is that non-Mormon scholars neither know or consult the book. All his arguments depend on that assumption about historicity, and so far it is an assumption. To the contrary, I have suggested that the book is of inestimable value for anyone interested in American religious history in the 19th century, but otherwise it is of no relevance for any non-Mormon. Oh, kapow! There's the left hook right there. He thinks it is an ancient text. I think it was written anew by an American around 1830. That is clear enough distinction, and one of us is wrong. And then I say, notice how the scholar sticks with the only issue there is and is not distracted from it by all the games apologists play, pretending everything else than archaeological evidence is most important. It is not. Apologists have no choice but to do this for one critical reason. They have no archaeological evidence to affirm anything in the Book of Mormon whatsoever. So Jenkins says this: my own view in scientific terms is easily falsifiable, as my hypothesis can be tested and verified. It could, in theory, be proven wrong with just a few convincing, credible, and well-documented New World examples, according to the reasonable standards for credibility that I have offered. So where are these examples? At present, with all due modesty and restraint, I am asking for just one. I return to the issue of methodology and how apologists try to have things both ways. Notice this is the scholar observing how the apologists interact. So this is the scholarly impression of all those knowledgeable Book of Mormon apologists. They try to have things both ways. If Mormons believe that the whole Book of Mormon scenario is a matter of interfaith, that is perfectly fine and defensible stance, and there is nothing that any outsider can really say about it. When I've asked this question at my own blog, the legion of commenters has ignored it, although plenty of writers have offered hopelessly vague generalities. Time and again, I've been offered lengthy catalogs of lame excuses why no such archaeological, genetic, or linguistic evidence exists, could exist, and why it is horrible even to seek it out. Now that does sound like a chapel Mormon, doesn't it? Wow. In that view, the Book of Mormon tells a symbolic and a metaphorical story that can be immensely significant to believers. Apologists, however, keep trying to establish that the book is authentic real-world history, in the sense that it genuinely occurred in the objective historical world and in identifiable locations. Witness any number of books and pamphlets and materials put out by farms over the years. Yeah, that claim lasts until the apologists are challenged, and then they instantly revert to position number one, namely, well, that's a matter of faith, so that no non-believer can critique it. Now, this is the scholar seeing how the apologists actually do handle challenges. Of itself, that tactic immediately removes apologist claims altogether from the realm of authentic science or authentic history. As to the falsifiability issue, apologists seem to have 1,000 reasons at their disposal to challenge each and every critique made of the Book of Mormon. At no point, though, is their overall claim falsifiable, in that it can be subject to testing and verification. Apologists can tell you why criticisms are not accurate and why others don't know enough, like Hamblin's been doing, but they cannot begin to tell you, though, why anyone should take their own claims seriously. If it is not verifiable, it is not science, nor should any non-believer begin to take it seriously. That's what Hamblin is trying to squirm away from. He wants us to take their scholarship seriously. We'll first establish that it's real. See, to me, that is a night and day distinction. This is Jenkins some more. If you can't prove that the peoples were actually there, you can say precisely nothing about any stories relating to them, whether dealing with wars, kings, migration, city names, or basically anything. Spot on, Dr. Jenkins. That's what Mormon apologists don't grasp. It is almost as if the whole thing was made up out of whole cloth. Ya think? It is Dr. Hamblin's blog, and he will write it as he chooses, but I am wondering, where are the concrete, specific, and credible examples supporting the historicity of the Book of Mormon? Because without them, what is the point of conducting a discussion? Here's the takeaway from this. If one of his graduate students walked in and said that he had written a paper on early Sumerian warfare, based entirely on messages and recollections ostensibly channeled by a Los Angeles spiritual medium in 1920, Dr. Hamblin would, so to speak, whoop him upside the head before throwing him out of the department, and he would be exactly right to do so. He is a responsible scholar. And the difference between that example and the Book of Mormon is what exactly? Let's savor that for just a couple of seconds. That is a deeply profound point. Yeah. Jenkins begins destroying Hamblin in this way. He says, that is, Hamblin says, Jenkins is woefully uninformed regarding ancient Book of Mormon studies. Nothing provides the slightest evidence that he understands ancient Book of Mormon studies and is therefore qualified to engage the issue. I respond that there is no such thing as ancient Book of Mormon studies, at least in terms of a vaguely credible field of academic study, any more than, say, Elvis survival studies. Well, in order to substantiate my opinion, I will need to call on an expert witness, namely William Hamblin himself. Here is where I believe Jenkins wins the argument. This just crucified Hamblin. You have said repeatedly that ancient Book of Mormon studies is an important field demanding study and attention. And he forgot to say respect. Boy, Hamblin really wants to be respected, right? Don't we all? Obviously, such a topic would not be explored in a secular university, say Penn State, but oddly, I don't see where and how this study is pursued in Brigham Young University, the Mormon flagship school itself. Ooh, as I have noted in recent comments, it certainly is not pursued in your terrific anthropology department, which includes archaeology. John Sorensen is listed as emeritus there, but he's now in his 90s. And that absence is all the more marked given the strong representation of Mesoamericanists in that unit. The strong BYU history department has several people studying Mormon history, but all I believe in the post-1830 period. So in which academic department is ancient Book of Mormon studies taught and studied at BYU? Where can an interested person take courses or pursue an advanced degree or even an undergraduate minor? Where can they take a course? As I noted, the Maxwell Institute does not appear to be an academic teaching department. Am I wrong about that? Nor is it just a matter that a specific field called Ancient Book of Mormon Studies is not listed under that title, but I see no coursework in related areas. The religion department website makes it impossible for me to draw conclusions about the work done there. But if Ancient Book of Mormon Studies is not cultivated in mainstream academic units at BYU, what does that say about the university's attitude to that field? For instance, if they took it seriously, presumably they would hire people in it and set up graduate programs. But they don't. Is that because of BYU's notorious anti-Mormon prejudice? I wonder. Or do they regard scriptural archaeology as a non-academic matter that is a matter of personal faith rather than of authentic scholarship? Something for a religious unit at most, and clearly not for history or archaeology. Well, Bill Hamblin, you know BYU well. So here is a serious question. How would your history department, say, react if someone volunteered to teach a course on Ancient Book of Mormon studies? Has no one attempted such a thing in recent years? Have you? You don't list it among your impressive diverse areas of expertise in teaching and research. In contrast, remarkably enough, a mainstream Christian school like Baylor teaches many, many courses on all aspects and eras of Jewish or Christian history, scripture, and archaeology, founded on the analysis of the Old and New Testaments. Oddly, in the context, so does a strictly secular school like Penn State, where such issues are repeatedly touched on in the study of mainstream history and archaeology. As a subject for secular scholarship, the Bible, the Old and New Testaments, is viewed not just a legitimate mainstream topic, it is essential for anyone trying to understand the ancient world. Why does BYU not treat the historical claims of the Book of Mormon similarly? Or to take another criterion, Academic departments place different values on different kinds of publication, with the most respect being accorded to high prestige and high visibility outlets. And that is where they want their faculty publishing. In history, for instance, that means internationally valued journals like American Historical Review. Or in archaeology, that would mean something like American Antiquity. The more you publish in high-profile journals, the greater the reward for the individual professor and the higher the prestige for the academic unit. So how seriously do BYU departments take what I would call Book of Mormon apologist journals and books like the recently defunct Farms Review? In fact, they give them nothing like they would, like the respect that they would to real mainstream secular journals in both history and archaeology, to the point that they actively discourage BYU, actively discourage their professors from publishing in the high-profile academic journals. Or that at least is what I read in your own powerful comments on this very enigmatic Mirror blog from 2013. I'll put that in the description below in this video. Bill Hamblin's confession of the BYU Board of Directors, who are the apostles of the Mormon Church, definitely persuaded the scholars not to study the Book of Mormon as an authentic ancient historical book of Scripture. Bill Hamblin's confession just blows your mind. Well, Jenkins read this specifically, and this is his summary of Hamblin. Specifically, you mentioned that BYU administrators look poorly on a faculty member publishing with such outlets, and that this has been the consistent policy of both my department and college for a quarter of a century, as you say yourself. Publishing with Farms and now publishing with Interpreter is considered unscholarly by BYU. From an administrative perspective, you remark, publications count as scholarly only if published outside the BYU bubble. If I'm misquoting you or quoting out of context, please do set me right. When I have myself criticized certain journals like the Interpreter as not scholarly, apologist commentators have rebuked me on the grounds that these are actually refereed journals, and therefore they demand respect. Listen to what the scholar Jenkins now says. But if BYU itself treats these outlets as unworthy and non-respectable, why should a non-Mormon writer such as myself act any differently? Take a breath. Maybe the apologists should take their complaints up with BYU, not me. And Bill Hamblin did. And that's why he retired early, because they basically told him to stick it. No joke. Whoa. So here's my bottom line. If ancient Book of Mormon studies is not cultivated at BYU, indeed, seemingly it is despised. Ancient Book of Mormon studies is despised at BYU. Where does it exist as an academic subject? And if not at BYU, why should anyone else care about it? In the words of a modern-day authority commenting on scholarly argument, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Book of Mormon apologists really, seriously, need just to fold. If there ever was an argument about Book of Mormon history, it is long settled. Game over. When I first saw Bill's publication, I had already quit apologetics, but not by a very long time. And I told everybody online. I said, were I still an apologist? That confession of Bill Hamblin is so absolutely damning that if I were an apologist, I would have jumped in my car, I would have driven down to Provo to Bill's house, and I would have demanded he take it down. I would have said, dude, you've just destroyed the church. You just destroyed any credibility the gospel, apostles, first presidency, and prophet have. You wiped it out because they're the board of directors. They're the ones that set the schedule for BYU. They're the ones that say, no, you can't teach that. Yes, you can teach that, but you have to come to certain conclusions. We want you to, etc. Bill confessed that they told him you get no credit whatsoever publishing anything defending the Book of Mormon. Stop doing it. Wow. That's more powerful than anything any anti-Mormon can write. So let's keep going. It's amazing. And Jenkins caught it. I know it again. Oh, and here's Bill. I note again, the Professor Jenkins is not in a position to declare that no scholars outside that area, Mesoamericanists, need to know anything about the ancient Book of Mormon studies because it is not a genuine discipline. And Bill Hamblin says, I find this wildly puzzling. See, now he's just fluffing off. He's diverting. He doesn't find that wildly puzzling at all because he confessed himself he is absolutely furious about it. He knows he doesn't have to take ABM seriously because other people who know essentially nothing about the Book of Mormon don't take it seriously. But BYU board of directors, who are the apostles, are the ones who don't take it seriously. So Bill Hamblin is saying they also know essentially nothing about the Book of Mormon. I mean, whoa. This is a fairly blatant case of scholarship by assertion and the fallacy of argument from authority. It's also just the facts that Bill Hamblin himself put on his own blog. So there is that. It is also a case of poisoning the well of discourse. No, it's a case of deciding to tell the truth, Bill, just like you did on your website. I simply can't take this type of assertion seriously. Now he's just acting like he's offended. Study the Book of Mormon and ABMS scholarship seriously, or don't talk about the question of Book of Mormon historicity at all. Now Bill is just being silly. Of course, we're going to talk about the Book of Mormon. We want you to present some evidence that it's real first. Then we'll engage your silly speculations and guessing in your so-called scholarly journals that even BYU says is not scholarly. I mean, Jenkins just trounces this whole Book of Mormon apologetics thing, doesn't he? Those are the only two legitimate scholarly options. No, they aren't. There's one real good legitimate scholarly option. Do what we ask and give us reason to even begin to take seriously the Book of Mormon. Where's that one archaeological item? See, the apologists, they'll get you off track every time if you go down the rabbit holes with them. There is a substantive difference between an opinion and an informed opinion. Oh, wow. Who cares? You see, Jenkins asks, in other words, if I am right, even BYU does not seem to give great weight to the ancient Book of Mormon studies. Do they not take the subject seriously? And if they don't, why should anyone else? Hamblin's response is so lame, it takes your breath away. He's diverting again. I'm sure there are never turf wars, nest feathering, or political power struggles at Baylor, so you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But BYU curriculum, organization, and departmental politics has nothing to do with the existence or non-existence of ancient Book of Mormon studies. And did you notice he evaded the question? Yeah. Just like he evades presenting a genuine piece of archaeology. So here's Bill's defense. BYU History Department teaches no classes on pre-Columbian America. Only anthropology, archaeology does. When I teach world history classes at BYU, I always talk about the Book of Mormon and pre-Columbian America in the week I spend on pre-Columbia. The anthropology department teaches many classes on pre-Columbian Mesoamerican studies. These classes generally integrate Book of Mormon issues with mainstream ideas. There is no class on Book of Mormon archaeology per se, because archaeology is organized by religion, period, and culture, not by books. Most universities don't teach classes on biblical archaeology anymore for this reason as well. At BYU, ABS is integrated into Mesoamerican archaeology classes. And finally, the fifth thing, most of the teaching of the Book of Mormon is done in religious education, and they definitely defend their turf. I have never taught a course on the Book of Mormon at BYU. Even though I've offered to do so to the administrators at religious education. All BYU students are required to take these classes in the Book of Mormon. I don't know for certain, but I'm quite confident all these courses present the Book of Mormon as authentic history, but of course. So in fact, there is a Book of Mormon studies program at BYU, and every student is required to participate about it. And I have talked to hundreds of former BYU students who say those Book of Mormon classes are taught by glorified seminary teachers, and they are absolutely a waste of time. Out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. You got hundreds of students, witnesses. So one cannot major in Book of Mormon studies because it is not a viable career path for students. There you go. No respect. One can major in ancient Near Eastern studies or archaeology at BYU, where the Book of Mormon is integrated into the curriculum. And the Maxwell Institute is a research, not a teaching institute. It recently abandoned support for the history of study of the Book of Mormon for personal, political, and power reasons. It was a coup. Those things happen in academia, but I'm sure not at Baylor. And for some reason, the little smiley face didn't copy here. Bill had put a smiley face on here. Finally, let me note the following. 1, there are dozens, if not several hundreds, of qualified scholars publishing on ABMS. Irrelevant. 2, the bibliography in the field amounts to hundreds and perhaps several thousand items, but not one is the actual archaeology item. You see, lots of words, no item. 3, several professional journals are dedicated to ABMS. Yeah, but there's still no archaeological item to demonstrate the reality yet. Several conferences are held each year on ancient Book of Mormon studies, but nobody shows up with an archaeological artifact yet. Numerous books on the topics are published each year, yes, but no artifacts are ever published in any year. BYU supports the Maxwell Institute, which until 3 years ago was dedicated primarily to the ancient Book of Mormon studies. How and why that change is controversial. It's an ideological shift. It was all about money, research positions, power, glory, PR, land, diverting donations to pet projects, etc. And now Jenkins gets real. Before I get to Jenkins, you notice how Hamblin's emphasis is so much on the authority of the scholars. And he thinks respect of their scholarship is more important than an archaeological item manifesting the reality of Nephites and Lamanites. So this is a really important point for the Mormon apologists. And they get mad when they're not respected. But they're never going to get respected if all they're publishing is inbred Mormon fluff through their own created Mormon non-peer-reviewed journals instead of the scholarly journals. It's that simple. That's the problem with Mormon apologetics. That's because they are apologists. As Kip Davis said, and I put him on the front of my one of my recent videos, a very important Dead Sea Scroll scholar, he told the truth when he said the problem with apologetics, and this is across the board, you guys, Mormon, Christian, Muslim, it does not matter. The problem with apologetics is it starts with the answer and then only finds what supports that answer. And we have Kerry Mulstein, the LDS Egyptologist, exactly saying that to the BYU Hawaii students, which entirely disqualifies anything he says on the papyri. So anyway, let me get back to this real quick. I'm running out of time. Oh, I'm out of time, and so many of you are here still with me. Thank you. Very good, very good. Everyone having fun? I hope so. Okay, hold on. Oh, I've got to pick. Okay, so let's get back to this. I've been mulling over a debate I'm having with Dr. Hamblin. Briefly, he believes that ancient Book of Mormon studies is a real academic discipline, and I don't. He writes, for instance, certainly more professional academic research work is done each year on the Book of Mormon than, say, Old Persian studies. By any objective standard, this is a thriving and independent academic discipline. I do now have an explanation to my puzzle, namely that he clearly has no idea what an academic discipline actually looks like. Ouch! He just cut off Hamblin at the knees with a samurai sword, man. He mentions Old Persian studies. A few minutes of web searching turned up the following schools where Old Persian can be studied and researched, and where you can obtain an academic qualification in that subject: Harvard, Yale, Chicago, UCLA, University of Texas, Austin, Duke, Columbia, several campuses over the University of California, including Berkeley. This does not include overseas schools such as Oxford, Cambridge, the Sorbonne, St. Andrews, SOAS, etc. My list, in other words, just scratches the surface. For comparison, here is a list of schools where ancient Book of Mormon studies can be studied and researched, and where you can obtain an academic qualification in that subject. I am including universities, colleges, seminaries, and higher ed institutions of all kinds, including community colleges. Cue the sound effects. Tumbleweeds rolling, crickets chirping, mournful sound of distant harmonica, coyote howling. Right. There is not one school anywhere in the world that teaches this discipline, ancient Book of Mormon studies. I can offer a similar contrast between the prestige and reputation of journals in the two respective fields, but it's pointless. Old Persian studies is a real academic discipline. Ancient Book of Mormon studies is not. This is not difficult, honestly. Let me say right away that on the surface, Dr. Hamblin's statement is seemingly more nuanced, as he says he is talking about academic study of the Book of Mormon, much of which research is indeed credible, reputable, and done in excellent academic settings of various kinds. That means studies of the post-1830 period and the actual history of modern Mormonism. So technically, his statement might be correct, but in the context, it is clear that he is talking about the worthless and discredited ancient subset of that topic. I apologize for using the word discredited. It never had any credibility to start with, so it really couldn't lose it. Ouch. Many people might indeed work and publish each year. Okay, this is critical. Many people might indeed work and publish each year on the ancient context of the Book of Mormon. None of that, though, qualifies in any sense as professional academic research work. This is how the scholars see this. Okay, let's understand. Dr. Hamblin and I may differ on many things, but on 2 points we speak. I echo entirely his remark. There is life outside of blogging, and that one would be an idiot to let the activity dominate one's life. I hope I don't put words in his mouth here. He states precisely the reasons why the assumptions that divide us may be too wide to allow any kind of meaningful debate or exchange until we can achieve common ground on these issues. Debating the specific implications of a particular inscription is pointless. Precisely. Our basic area of contention is this. I think we have to start discussing proofs that support the Book of Mormon, and that is where Hamblin disagrees. This is so fascinating. I'm just so not kidding. In my view, before we can speak of any meaningful area of study in any matter, we first have to agree that there is a real subject, right, to provide a foundation for discussion and analysis. That makes sense, right? Before agreeing that ancient Book of Mormon studies constitutes a valid field, I first need to be convinced that there is any evidence whatsoever to support its legitimacy. Amen and amen. Yeah. Without that, I cannot agree that it is any kind of academic or scholarly discipline in which we can legitimately speak of qualified experts any more than in Elvis survival studies or Bigfoot biology. As I've said, I have quite minimal criteria for being convinced that there is in fact a there, but these have not been satisfied yet. I don't therefore agree that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of qualified scholars publishing on ancient Book of Mormon studies. Now, and this is an important distinction that the scholars see, there may actually be, though, hundreds of interested and even devoted individuals. That's true. But until we have established that it is a legitimate field, we can't agree that they are qualified in anything. They may be scholars in particular fields, but I don't agree that they are scholars of ancient Book of Mormon studies, because nobody has yet shown me that it is indeed a valid field of scholarship. I mean, come on. That is as well said as a scholar can say it, man. The Mormons haven't even got up to bat yet. They think they're hitting home runs. See, they're out there in the batting cage 20 miles away from the stadium, swinging at baseballs, thinking they're hitting grand slams and home runs. They aren't even in the stadium yet playing the game, man. So he says, well, that may seem like a matter of individual preference or prejudice on my part, but my view is substantiated by the complete lack of recognition for the subject in any and all universities, in any and all colleges or like institutions, including BYU, and the absence of the slightest respect accorded to those Mormon apologetic journals, the Journal of the Book of Mormon Studies and the Review of Books and the Interpreter. There may be plenty of journals in the field, of course, but Dr. Hamblin himself remarked they are ignored or despised even at BYU, the one institution that conceivably would give them any credence whatsoever. But they don't. Nor, as I have said, can you take an actual degree of any kind in this subject of ancient Book of Mormon studies. There's nothing to be given from it, not even an undergraduate minor, still less a doctoral degree. So, if it's not an academic discipline, then it is irrelevant to note how many people work in the area. Again, note it, and this is so important. One of the interesting things that apologetics will focus on is quantity, not quality. And this is kind of a tricky issue because, I mean, quantity is part of scholarship. There's no question about that. That's not the issue. The issue is quantity. Well, look, we have 1,375 people researching in the ancient Book of Mormon studies area. So if it's not a real field, if it's not an actual discipline you can get accreditation with or a doctoral degree, then who cares how many people are working in it? And what are their qualifications? Are they plumbers, electricians, government workers, moms and dads, etc.? Yeah. So this is a really important point here. Reading some of your comments. You guys are having way too much fun without me. I'm trying to be serious, and you guys are having too much fun. I love it. So anyway, I noted what Dr. Hamblin says about the incorporation of Book of Mormon materials in the anthropology courses at BYU. However, I have no basis of evaluating exactly how extensive or serious these perspectives are. I do note that the department webpage does not once incorporate the words Mormon or the Book of Mormon, except in the description of the interests of the Venerable John Sorensen. And likewise, again, Hamblin says that one can major in ancient Near Eastern studies or archaeology at BYU, where the Book of Mormon is integrated into the curriculum. Yet the words Mormon or Book of Mormon do not appear once in the Ancient Near Eastern Studies webpage. So if BYU departments do indeed cover these matters, they do so in a stealth way. And how does a scholar view that? He says, that strikes me as remarkable for the Mormon mothership BYU. Why are they so embarrassed? Now, see, this is the impression that's leaving on the scholarly world because, quite frankly, the old boys running the show in Salt Lake City in the Cobb, the church office building is called the Cobb, who are running Salt Lake and mainly Utah, they don't know diddly spit about the Book of Mormon, and they don't want anyone else to contradict what they want you to know about the Book of Mormon. That's why they're embarrassed. That attitude of the Book of Mormon's historicity is in total contrast to the explicit coverage of biblical matters in mainstream Christian institutions, or indeed secular schools. And don't read anything I write as an expressing anything less than respect for BYU, an excellent school that is distinguished by fine academics and deeply impressive student culture and study of surface. But, and here's the point, Ancient Book of Mormon study seems to be the enthusiasm that dare not speak its name. So I return to my basic question. If BYU does not treat these matters as a serious academic discipline, who does? Dr. Hamblin notes that one cannot major in the Book of Mormon studies because it is not a viable career path for students. Well, that in itself is a significant comment, because if you work primarily on the Bible, say the Old and the New Testaments, you have an excellent chance of getting a job in a mainstream academic unit, such as history or archaeology, in a secular university, as well as in religious schools. Now, why do you think that difference exists? Is it perhaps that no credible academic institution of any kind, Mormon or otherwise, views Ancient Book of Mormon studies as an authentic or respectable academic discipline? Those are powerful questions that Mormon apologists, even today, right now, need to take seriously. For the sake of argument, and this is, again, this is how the scholars see this. For the sake of the argument, let's grant not just that Ancient Book of Mormon studies is a respectable academic discipline, but that it is also active. For instance, Hamblin does report there are dozens, if not hundreds, of qualified scholars publishing in this field. The bibliography amounts to several thousand items. Several professional journals are dedicated to it. Several conferences a year are held. Numerous books on the topic are published each year. In that case, if we grant all that, see, we don't have evidence that it even exists, but if we grant all that, it would be very simple for him or any one of those qualified scholars to respond to a straightforward question. Can anyone cite any single credible fact, object, site, or inscription from the New World that supports any one story found in the Book of Mormon? One sherd of pottery, one tool of bronze or iron, one carved stone, one piece of genetic data, And by credible, I mean drawn from a reputable scholarly study, an academic book, or refereed journal, not some cranky piece of pseudoscience. I absolutely, totally respect Jenkins for being able to stay on point. That's impressive, because the baffling bat dung that Hamblin throws at him is utterly mind-boggling. And now, unfortunately, I'm over 2 hours, so I'm going to ask you guys, do you want me to keep going and try to finish this out? I'm about 2/3 of the way through this, and what I presented to you is a very selected part of this entire debate, and it's only the first half. The second half I'll give next week, and it is incredibly interesting. But should I call it good right now, and I'll include this in next week with the idea that you'll understand that it's going to be about 3 hours next week. Or do you want me to continue? Because the rest of this is some of the greatest, in my opinion, is some of the most fantastic evidence of the difference between the scholar and the apologist. So if you want me to keep going, please let me know, Rook. Doug Vincent says, yes, keep going. Radio Free Mormon's laughing like crazy. If you want me to keep going, I will be happy to. Hi, Barry Richens, Tim Rathbone, all you guys, 4 of 6. Doug Vincent, Patty Kate, good to see you. Peter Higgs, sorry if I'm not mentioning all of you. Don Smith, Tessa Don Smith. Oh, Steve Acosta, you're so awesome. Peter Higgs, good to see you. Okay, so let me know real quick. I'm sorry to stop, but okay, Radio Free Mormon screaming at me. You keep going. Forward, Renee Nolan. Go, Tim. Okay, you guys. All right, Radio Free. It's all good. Why not go on? Okay, let's keep going, because let's keep going. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to show you what it is. This is simply fantastic. And thank you for all your moral support, your financial support, your physical. I love all you guys. So let's keep going, because this is one reason why you guys keep coming back to the BYP, because I deliver. I'm not trying to brag. That's my motto. Small but powerful. So let's keep going. Okay, so here we are. And so he puts the challenge out again. So as I've noted, we are, after all, dealing with a people whose numbers ran in, and this is still Jenkins, and now he's talking about the Book of Mormon. And what a point to make. Really seriously, let's be real. We are, after all, dealing with a people whose numbers ran into the hundreds of thousands, at least at any given time, if not millions, and they built great cities. So if they were there, they would certainly, definitely, assuredly have left a massive and unmissable archaeological trace. So can anyone cite such a thing? Really, the question is so easy and straightforward that I am embarrassed to ask it, but no one stepped forward to yet. Now, okay, now we're getting to the fun stuff. Hold on, I got to get a drink. Just bear with me, because now we get to the cream of the crop. This is so mind-boggling. Okay, here we go. So, Hamblin comes back. Okay, so when discussing the meaning of Scripture, people often raise the question of historicity. Unfortunately, this is a complicated topic with many distinct yet overlapping issues that are frequently misunderstood or conflated. Historicity essentially means that a person mentioned in an ancient text really lived, and that an event really happened, that a place actually existed. So historicity relates to questions such as, did Moses really exist? Were there really an Israelite exodus from Egypt? Was there Mount Sinai? On the other hand, and then he gets off on going off on a historical Gandalf in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Was there a siege at Helm's Deep? Was there actually a volcano named Mount Doom? where Sauron, I mean, what on earth are you doing, Hamblin? Really? Broadly speaking, he says, history as a modern academic discipline is a study of the human past. For Pete's sake already, he's stalling. And this is important because here's the actual evidence that shows the difference between an apologist and a scholar. So bear with me. I'm going to try to read a lot of this, but I'm going to try to also summarize it because this goes on and on and on and on to the point of complete ludicrous. But so bear with me because the end of this is really something. So anyway, and now we're trying to distinguish history from archaeology. And we have to find that history isn't an empirical discipline. So paradoxically, the subject of historians' inquiry, the past, doesn't really exist. It can't be directly observed, measured, experimented on. It can only be understood by analyzing textual, artistic, artifactual, and monumental remains from the past. That is, documents, art, objects, buildings created by past peoples to have survived into the present, where the historian can analyze them. So, historians don't actually study the past. They study those texts and objects that were made by humans in the past and that still exist in the present. This is a crucial distinction that many people fail to recognize. Hamblin replies with yet more rabbit holes. He's good at this, you know. So, when dealing with ancient history, people need to remember that most historical records from the past haven't survived. The most important and potentially enlightened texts from antiquity, for example, are often irretrievably lost. Imagine a historian 3,000 years from now attempting to recreate the accurate history of the 21st century Utah based on fragmentary Facebook records. See, he is off in flippin' la-la land, man. Imagine how much nonsense and inaccuracy, how many lies and jokes she would need to sort through. Yeah, can you imagine someone reading through Hamblin's explanation here? What a joke, all right. What was thought to be important on Facebook would seldom be considered important by our future historian. Further, and now let's jump off Facebook and let's go to English as a dead language. Whoa! And so let's reconstruct the language and create her own dictionary based solely on the fragmentary surviving Facebook records. What will she make of LOL and XOXO? This is rather like what historians of antiquity have to do. And then another serious problem based on the ancient world on fragmentary surviving inscriptions and texts is that sincere people are mistaken and confused much of the time. Moreover, many people lie, and language is often ambiguous, which is especially problematic with poorly understood ancient tongues. Satire and propaganda were as widespread in antiquity as they are now. Furthermore, ancient people sometimes told imagined stories that their audiences knew to be fiction. Hamblin replies with yet more rabbit holes. He's like the Energizer Bunny, man. Modern historians, however, often cannot be sure if an ancient author intended his writing as fiction or reality, or how an ancient audience would have understood it. All of these variables and many more sometimes make it difficult to clearly evaluate the intent of an ancient author and the accuracy of his claims. What if the historian 3,000 years from now were trying to gain an accurate understanding of the 21st century American politics based solely on a collection of fragments of speeches from President Barack Obama? So now we're on American politics and Barack Obama. We're supposed to be talking about the ancient Book of Mormon archaeology, right? How many different subjects does Hamblin wiggle around and take us to? Whether you like him or not is irrelevant. Our future historian would find it effectively impossible to get an accurate understanding of the contemporary United States if his speeches were the sole source. Yet, royal propaganda is all we have in our surviving ancient historical records, blah, blah, blah. And then you got to go to the royal annals of where? Egypt and Mesopotamia. Anywhere but Mesoamerica. Right, Bill? Thus, the study of history and the question of historicity are fraught with complexities and difficulties. We rarely have an open and shut case. Did you get that? Okay. Hamblin replies with more and more rabbit holes. I mean, he's still frickin' going, man. J.R.R. Tolkien? Let's get back to him, shall we? He's important. By golly, if he's not. J.R.R. Tolkien is Lord of the Rings to the world as fiction, and thus it's authentic because it's exactly what it claims to be. A fictional tale describing imaginary people, events, objects, and places. And now we jump from J.R.R. Tolkien and we go to the Book of Deuteronomy. By contrast, presents itself not only as history, but as inspired history. If the story of Moses and the Exodus is fiction, the Book of Deuteronomy is inauthentic. That is, it is not what it claims to be. And now we jump from J.R.R. Tolkien to the Book of Deuteronomy, and now we go to authorial intent. It's often very difficult to understand the authorial intent of an ancient text. Most are synonymous. It's equally difficult to determine how a text was understood by its ancient audience. And now we get to Joseph Smith and his authorial intent. Was he writing the Book of Mormon as real history, or was he writing it as inspired fiction? Who the hell knows, and who the hell cares? Anything except giving an actual archaeological artifact is all we want to see, according to Bill Hamblin's Apologetics. And now we get into the comparison with Jesus's parables as inspired fiction. And therefore, we also know that Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon presented the book as a historical account of real people and places. The claim is that the resurrected Jesus appears to the real Nephites. So now we're wandering all the way over across the world from Jesus in the old world to Jesus in the new world. Take another deep breath, because Hamblin continues and continues replying. Are you kidding me, man? Oh, holy data dump of irrelevance, Batman. Oh, okay. It's important to realize that not all of the books of the Bible are presented themselves as history. The Bible includes poetry and proverbs, moral exemplars. The book of Job may well be a work of fiction, a parable of sorts, or a proto-philosophical dialogue. But Job doesn't present itself as history, though some modern readers have assumed it to be such. That is, Job is a work of fiction. It's still authentic because it makes no internal claim to be historical. Likewise, when we turn to the Book of Mormon, the allegory of the olive tree in Jacob 5 isn't historical. It presents itself as inspired fiction. The Book of Kings, on the other hand, clearly presents itself as authentic history, though it makes no internal claim to inspiration or revelation. Now, it's possible for modern readers to assert historicity for an ancient book that never claimed historicity for itself. This is a problem for the Iliad. So we've gone to the Book of Mormon. We've gone to the Old Testament. We've gone to the Iliad. We've gone to the New Testament. And now we get to go to Homer and the Iliad. Was there really an Achilles who died besieging the city of Ilium? Or is Homer just telling a great story? The most problematic example is, and now we get to go to Alexander the Great. So we are covering world history in just 8 paragraphs here, man. The Alexander romance, the most widely read Alexander biography of all, was the essentially fictional Alexander romance by Pseudo-Callisthenes. And this is vital information about the Book of Mormon authenticity. This text, the Pseudo-Callisthenes of the Alexander romance, was far more popular than the authentic biographies, and it survives in Greek, Latin, Armenian, Syriac, Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, Ethiopic, Turkish, Bulgar, Mongolian, Italian, German, Old Norse, Spanish, Middle English, Old French, Old Slavonic, and Scottish. Hamblin continues on. So how's that archaeology artifact coming, Bill? The fact that fictional stories about Alexander the Great proliferated throughout the medieval world. Hey, now we get to go to the medieval times. Woohoo! And these were more widely read than his accurate biographies, has absolutely no bearing on the question of the historicity of Alexander. People in antiquity wrote fictional tales about historical figures just as people do today. The historicity of Alexander isn't undermined by the vast number of false stories circulated about him, although those false stories might undermine our modern ability to know accurate information about Alexander. That, however, is an epistemological question concerning our ability to know the past, not a question about the reality of the past itself. The opposite problem is also possible. We must see every angle. If modern scholars reject the historicity of an ancient text that claims to recount real history, that requires rejection of its authenticity, since the text claims to be authentic history but isn't. Accordingly, its author must have been either mistaken, delusional, or fraudulent. Now we get to the minimalist Bible scholars maintain that the historical books of the Bible and the Gospels are related to historical reality in much the same way that Alexander romance is related to the Alexander of history. They maintain fictional or false stories about possibly real people. Biblical minimalism, though, is a controversy and very debatable position. Now Hamblin demonstrates utter ineptitude. If Dr. Jenkins will, for the sake of argument, at least pretend to take the ancient Book of Mormon studies discipline marginally seriously, we can perhaps move on. I'm very skeptical. His position renders the well of discourse perpetually poisoned. I'm not asking him to accept the conclusions of the ancient Book of Mormon studies scholars. I'm asking him to take them seriously enough to give them a fair hearing. His ongoing rhetorical posture makes me believe he will be unable to do so. And BYP asks in all seriousness, why grant that? Is their work not the basis for taking them seriously? Hamblin's begging someone somewhere to take this study of Mormon scholarship and apologetics seriously just for the sake of argument? Why? There's no point if it's not a real discipline and their arguments are all based on wishful thinking of reality that has not been established yet. But Hamblin goes on. So, to the offensive, you going to show us an archaeological artifact? No. Professor Jenkins has repeated, annoyingly enough, isn't that interesting, annoyingly often, the following challenge. Yeah, that's because you can't do it, dude. Can anyone cite any single credible fact, object, site, or inscription from the New World that supports any one story found in the Book of Mormon? One shred of pottery, one tool or bronze of iron, one carved stone, one piece of genetic data, and by credible, I mean drawn from a reputable scholarly study, an academic book or refereed journal, not some cranky piece of pseudoscience. In trying to deal with this question, the first issue we must engage is epistemological. And that's where Hamblin loses the war. The first issue is never epistemological. It's always archaeological. When dealing with an ancient historical reality, you first have to demonstrate that there is a there. Jenkins has a powerful point, and he is certainly backed up by one of my favorite biblical scholars, William G. Deaver, Beyond the Texts, How the Archaeology Establishes Ancient Israel, not an epistemology. So, how do we know the past? It's irrelevant. And more specifically, how can we determine how archaeological data may or may not reflect the Book of Mormon? Well, you're claiming it's real history, so that's your issue. There is no how do we figure this out at all. There's only you. You're making the claim. Prove it. That's the thing. Let's start with one sherd of pottery. There are literally millions of potsherds from pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, and this creates a fundamental problem. And BYP says, in other words, no, we don't have a single archaeological artifact to show that they were real people living here. Notice how Bill Hamblin just can't say the obvious word no to the question. He is still trying to squirm out of it. Hamblin continues showing utter ineptitude. By what criteria should we expect to be able to distinguish a Nephite potsherd from a Maya potsherd solely on the basis of pottery typology? Crap, I don't know, but I don't care. That's your issue. You're claiming they're real. Demonstrate it. If you don't have it in pottery, you got to have it in something else if you're going to have a legitimate discourse with the rest of the world whom you are trying to impress with all of your vast army of credible and awesome scholars. So, and as a preliminary methodological analogy, by what criteria can we distinguish between Canaanite and Israelite pottery solely on the basis of pottery typology? If we didn't have the Bible, could we identify Israelite solely by pottery typology? I don't care about the differences. You do. You see how this works? So, while you're at it, talking to Jenkins, could you read John Clark's essay, Archaeology, Relics, and Book of Mormon Belief? Professor Clark, once again, is a widely respected Mesoamerican archaeologist at BYU specializing in pre-classic period. Here, I should add that if Professor Jenkins is unwilling to do his homework, this discussion is not going to get very far. And BYP now says, now Hamblin is just being ridiculous. Did he forget that it is his Mormon scholars who are making the claims and need to provide the evidence? It's not our problem. And homework? There is no homework to do for us. There is only waiting for Mormon scholars to demonstrate they have evidence for the reality of Nephites and Lamanites. Did Hamblin lose or forget the memo? We'll wait. There's no worries there because we're enjoying reading about people who really existed, like the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and the Maya. Now then, back to reality for your own homework. How's that artifact coming along, Bill? Any pottery found tied to Book of Mormon peoples yet? Hamblin continues astonishingly. At this point, you're going, oh my gosh, this is becoming a double-handed face palm. He continues to totally miss the point to all of this. To recap, Professor Jenkins steadfastly refuses to accept the existence of ABMS because there's no actual evidence of it being a real discipline. He laid it out for you, Bill. There's a bunch of enthusiasts, but that doesn't mean that's a valid scholarly discipline. Holy cow. Even for the sake of argument, you're damn right. I'm not willing to accept it either. Correct. I'm not going to grant the argument. I don't care about the argument. It's irrelevant to the argument. The argument is you have no evidence for the reality of the Nephites and Lamanites, and all you need to do to demonstrate that and get the ball going is give us one archaeological artifact. And you have stonewalled and forestalled and gone through 229,000 different rabbit trails and holes in order to not answer the question. I mean, wow. So, as far as I can tell, he steadfastly refuses to read articles by LDS scholars. Now, so do I. None of that's relevant, even if they provide an answer to a question he asks. The question is, can anyone provide an artifact showing the reality of anything in the Book of Mormon. It's not a philosophical discussion on paper, man. He is either... Hamblin just blows my mind here. In this, he is a poster child for the modern academy. I want to flip Bill Hamblin off. That's bullshit. There is no need to even read the Book of Mormon in order to proclaim with supreme confidence that it is bogus until it's established as reality first. That is entirely correct. It's a valid, it's a logical, and it's a rational conclusion. Reading it doesn't make it real. Finding an actual reality of its claim is real. I can't comprehend almost that Hamblin doesn't get it. I think he's playing coy just to forestall the fact, to hide the embarrassment that after 200 years, you're still bankrupt with. That's what I suppose. Wow. So, and then he says, yeah, I understand your position. So here's the idea. Professor Jenkins needs to start answering questions, not just asking them. Once again, no, he does not. Neither do I. I don't have to answer any of your questions. I just have to see a piece of archaeological material showing the reality of the history in the Book of Mormon. That's your job. I don't have to answer any of your silly rabbit tail questions to any of you Mormon apologists. Don't you get that yet? We don't believe in your book. You're the ones claiming it's real. Then you get to show us the evidence. So far, you haven't given us anything. It's amazing. Let's start with 2 questions. Have you ever read the entire Book of Mormon with any degree of seriousness? And 2, are you willing to read articles and books by LDS scholars on ABMS? And so I responded, no, no, and no. Establish archaeology, that it's real through archaeology. Then we will talk about reading all of your ridiculous silliness that you've written. That's the answer. I promise, I can't, you can't fake this, man. Hamblin just can't bring himself around to saying that there's no archaeology. Now he distracts us for what, the 29th straight time now? With something else. This is insane. He just can't bring himself to say, no, there's no archaeology. So here's Hamblin again. Well, you know, the real problem with the rejection of the historicity of the Book of Mormon is not that the Book of Mormon professes pre-Columbian transoceanic contact with the New World. 60 or 70 years ago, that possibility was almost universally rejected by scholars on pre-Columbian America. The Viking site at Laonau Meadows was discovered only in 1968. Now, the possibility is widely accepted, at least in principle. So, the problem with the Book of Mormon is not the claim that a small colony of Israelites from the Middle East might have come to the New World and thrived for a few centuries before being subsumed into the broader Mesoamerican culture. The problem is that the Book of Mormon professes to have been delivered by an angel and translated by the power of God. The problem with the Book of Mormon is that it claims Jesus visited the New World. These claims, rather than its claims about pre-Columbian American archaeology, are the fundamental reason it receives almost no serious attention by pre-Columbian scholars. To accept the Book of Mormon as history requires accepting Joseph Smith as the prophet and Jesus as the Christ. In the modern secular academy, it is the religious claims of the book rather than its archaeological claims which dooms it to being rejected without it ever having been read. BYP responds and states the obvious. Were there actual reality depicted via archaeological remains for the Book of Mormon, it would not matter how it came to be. It would be investigated, Bill. This is just a religious excuse to keep you from admitting you are bankrupt for archaeological evidence. Not a very convincing performance here either, just more obfuscation. Jenkins never once said it was the religion in the book that caused him to doubt its reality. Not once. He has only asked for an archaeological item which you, obviously representing Mormon apologists, don't have. No matter how respected you are or how many doctoral degrees you can all amass together with all 88,972 of you, if there are, without one archaeological basis of reality, you ain't got spit. That's the cold hard fact of reality. Now you gotta hand it to Hamblin. I mean, seriously, he finds more creative ways to prevent himself from saying no than anyone else on the planet when it comes to if there are any archaeological evidence for the Book of Mormon. Check this next rabbit trail out. Question for Professor Jenkins. Is there any archaeological evidence for the existence of Israelites and Judeans in Iron Age Mesopotamia, or are those tens of thousands of Israelites and Judeans essentially transparent in the archaeological record? And very properly, it was at this point that Jenkins said he was withdrawing since it was useless. And he did. But he did come back, thank God, because it's his second series of exchanges with Hamblin and all of the other apologists who attempted to help Hamblin out since they saw he getting his head handed to him on a platter. The second part for next week is absolutely going to be a must to watch. It's beyond phenomenal. I promise. It will. It's awesome. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for enduring with me. And yet, in a way, it's so much fun. It just is, man. Because, you know, that was me. You guys, 15 years ago, that was me. Some of you were arguing with me back then. That's what I was doing. Just what Hamblin did. I'm so grateful to be free from all of that ridiculous kind of thinking. You have no idea. Right? So anyway, I've kept you here 2.5 hours. Bless your heart. You stuck it out with me. Oh, thank you, Eaters of the Dead. That's very gracious. You ask, welcome back. I love how you stated history has caught up with the LDS Church. Absolutely. I agree that you have a time frame of mass exodus. Well, when you say mass exodus, you probably have to get a little nuanced. I mean, even the general authority recently said we haven't had this bad of an apostasy since Kirtland. So I would say a mass exodus is happening right now. Now, I to be honest with you, I'm speculating because I haven't studied the numbers, because that particular type of study or concept doesn't really bother me. I mean, it's not of high enough interest that I can really get my teeth into it like I can this archaeology discussion. But I would say the people leaving the church, and we think seriously it's by the hundreds of thousands. I honestly don't think that's going to change much. So thank you for your question. Thank you for your super chat. Appreciate that. Yeah, I am, Tim. I am having fun. Yeah. Oh, Tessa Dawn Smith, thank you very much. I love your guts too, Steve Acosta. You are awesome. Bernardo Riley, thank you very much. We're very massive folks. Doug Vincent, I love you, bro. You're just beyond awesome. You are one of a kind. Hey, A. Ross. Thank you for showing up. Yes. Radio Free Mormon, good to see you, my friend. Oh, all right. Yeah. Oh, oh, how fun. Looks like you guys had a good time, and that's the idea. But I so promise you, I'm not trying to. I promise next week you won't be disappointed. It's better. I mean, it's more strong, and it's vastly more funny. It's just mind-boggling how he just manhandles everybody that comes his way. Yes, so interesting. And I have some very, very cool information outside of the debate with Jenkins and Hamblin that I'm hoping I could put together. Yeah, I don't know. Depends on how much time we have. I can put enough information on this together to go 3 hours pretty easy. And next week, I'm not going to try to cut it off short. I'm going to give you the full flow so that I can get this in 2 parts. But yeah, you're going to enjoy that, I think, I hope. I mean, it seems like you've been enjoying this one. So, William Tarbrush, good to see you. So, yeah, the chat is always fun, isn't it? That's some of the funnest stuff of live sessions is the chat family. Yeah, and you guys are beyond awesome. Every one of you, man. I love every one of you. You're all spectacular. Hey, Greg Kroon. Oh, that's interesting. That's a good point. I'm putting this up just for those who watch the video and don't see the live. That argument that you aren't credible because you haven't read their materials is also done by flat earthers. Thank you for that. Yeah, and it is. Yeah, I've read it's also probably done by Bigfoot people and UFOologists, the UFO stuff. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Steve Acosta. You rock. Okay, now this I can get behind. BYP is MAGA to the core, making apologetics goofy again. Now that I would agree with. Yes, sir. All right. Oh, I'm so glad you guys enjoy yourself here. That full Monty. Oh, thank you for being here. I don't know if you're still here or not. I'm starting to thank everybody, but appreciate all of you. Renee Nolan, good to see you again. Absolutely wonderful. I love seeing all my audience. I have so much information, and the reason I want to read it too, and I'm not trying to bore you, I promise. I'm trying to inform you, but the reason I read it is so that I can really actually get the actual points across from both sides, the scholar and the apologist, because it's really important to see the way they set up the argument. I mean, Radio Free Mormon knows that with his ridiculous, stupid accusations being made against him by what's-her-nose fuddy dud from John DeLynne's old show. I can't think of her name. She's such a nut job. But anyway, yeah. Very good. Oh, Radio Free Mormon asked me, Carrie, how influential was this debate? You're leaving the church. I actually had left when I read the debate. And when I read it, it was an absolute complete anchoring point. And it still is. This was on par, really sincerely. This was on par with the papyri issue, with the Book of Abraham. That was the shelf breaker, but this was the anchor. This debate's just, I mean, it's phenomenal. And I'm very grateful that I can share it on YouTube as well. So that's very important. Get this information out because everyone has a right to know. Yeah. And if the Mormon apologists want to respond to this, and if they want to say, well, BYP, you're wrong, etc., then my response is going to be properly what? That's right. Well, where's your archaeological artifact? Because that's the basis that we must begin with. And man, I have, without exaggeration, you guys, world-class scholars that verify that. it almost can't get better than Deaver, man. So yeah, it's all interesting. Oh, hey, George Washington. Hey, Duke. Good to see you too, my friend. Appreciate you showing up. Thank you. Yeah, I'm coming in late. Oh, there's 37 of us still, so I really hope I get to say hi to all of you. Barry Richens. Oh, you stud muffin. I appreciate you, brother. I really do. He's my mentor, man. He's taught me so. And Mark Crispin. Yeah, baby. I'm doing it way late now. Yeah, baby. But that's the way it works. So, yeah. It's all good. Steve Acosta. Oh, Randy Jordan. Always good to see you, my friend. Yeah. All right. I think I've covered y'all. It's just so good to see some new names and make new friends and have y'all in the chat family. 4 of 6. Good to see you, my friend. Yeah, it's just so good to have y'all in the chat family. Patty Cake, I hope I said hi to you. If not, I'm saying hi now. Because, I mean, it's all helpful. Really is. At least I think so. And that's what makes it so much fun. Boy, you guys really rocked on the comments tonight. Yeah, well, there was a lot to say. I had a lot to say, and I will again next week too. So anyway, okay, I have, thank you so much I appreciate your support. Jackson Pierce. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, I didn't get to see it. Yeah, that was at 6:36 because I was so busy reading already. Oh, Steve Acosta, you're so generous. Yeah. Appreciate you. Richard Petchak. Good to see. And Robert Knight. Very good. Very good. Peter Higgs. Good to see you. Yeah, I appreciate all of you. Yeah, you guys are just Dan Vogel. Yeah, wanted to be sure and mention you. Always appreciate your support and your intellectual. Dan and I talk on the phone periodically, and when we do, it ends up being several hours. And I'm always so grateful for that time, one-on-one with a real historian. There's nothing like it, man. I love you, brother. You're awesome. Seriously, and I hate getting serious. You know me. I mean, I am the backyard professor. I mean, I throw books around. Is there any kind of Mormon book I can throw around real quick? I haven't done this for a while. Okay, let's see. Oh, man, can't find any more. Hold on. There's got to be a Carol Givens book. Yes! Carol Givens. Although here we go. Conrad. Doubt your dad. Throw that crap out of here. Yeah. I haven't thrown a book for a while, so yes, you're welcome. See, that's the benefit of you guys sticking around. Yeah, baby. All right, guys, I gotta go. I am gonna get out of here. I have to go do a potty break, and I'm leaving. So hopefully, I will see you guys next weekend. I promise you won't be disappointed. Big program next weekend, and it's the cream of the crop. This introduction was fantastic. But man, it just gets better. Part 2 is not going to be less. So, all right, that's enough promising. I am going to head out. Appreciate everybody. See you guys soon.